Right, middle of Perek of Dalit. Let's try to finish off the Perek B'siyata D'Shmaya. So we were in the middle of the sugya of trying to figure out the difference between different isurim, because we said that a person will be moisa nefesh their life not to do avodah zarah, but when it comes to inyan arayis, it seems to be that a person will unfortunately fall with these inyanim. And we explained, and that was the last paragraph we ended with, and that's why I want to pick it up from there. The hefresh, we said the difference between them is basically the ruach shtus. The ruach shtus that the Gemara Mosquito told us is the only reason that a person does the aveira. Otherwise, it's not shy for a person to do an aveira, which is so rochik from the Rabbeinu Shalom. How does a person do that? Because he has the ruach shtus that goes inside. That ruach shtus can only affect up until chokhmah, but not chokhmah itself. Mimela, the light of chokhmah, the illumination of chokhmah, is so great that if it would affect chokhmah, then you would never get anywhere. So that's why by avodah zarah, but bowing down to an idol, it's so bright, there's so chokhmatic over there, and maybe that's why it can't affect that, which is why a person will never, even if he's so far from the Rabbeinu Shalom and Yiddishkeit, he'll never bow down, because that's too much, right? It's too bright over there, and the klipa doesn't really get there. The klipa of the ruach shtus can only get up until chachma, which is obviously including arayis. Aval. Be'emes la'mitoi, afila avira kala. Even a very light Aveira, over al Ratzon Elyon Baruch Hu. Even a small Aveira, whatever that means in Aveira color, we hear this, Benny shown this many different times. Well, the Mishnah Pirkei says we can't judge because we don't know the Matan Sora, we don't really understand it, but we do find a showness. The Rechaim HaKadosh says it, for example, in Parshas Noach. We find it over here in other places, this idea between an Aveira color, Aveira Chamura, but we can, each one on their own can discuss, can try to understand what's an Aveira color, a small one, whatever that may be. A person is over on that, he's over on the Ratzon Elyon Baruch Hu. But Tachlis HaPeh miYechudoi v'Achdusoi Yisbarach Yoseh Mesitra Achwa v'Klipa Nikras Elikim Acherim v'Avodah Zarah Mamish. So when a person does even what he categorizes as an Aveira Kala, he's distancing himself, he's separating from the Achdus and the Yichud of the Rabbeinu Shalom more than the Sitra Achwa and the Klipa that's called Elikim Acherim and Avodah Zarah himself. That's that person that's doing the Aveira. You hear this? V'yosa, now referring again to the Bal Aveira, the guy that does the Aveira is worse, he's lower, mikol advarim, hanishbor mimeni ba'olam hazeh, from all the things that come out of that in this world, which is shehem behemoths tameyas, v'chayes v'oivos tameim, v'shkotzav v'remosim, all of the things that are automatic animals, which all come from, of course, that klipa, that place. This guy that does even what we call an Aveira Kala, small little big deal, a little Aveira, he's worse than all of that. Yeah? Ukamaima, like the Gemara says in Sanhedrin Lamed Ches, Yatush Kodmucha, right? Which basically means that the mosquito was created before you. The Gemara is telling us that we know the Rabbeinu Shalom created a human being by giving us humility. If a person is a balgaiva and he thinks of himself as self, so just so you should know, the Gemara says that mosquito was actually created before you, because all the animals were created before us. So, mosquito is the lowest of all the animals, as he's going to explain, which is why the Tanya uses dafka, the example of a yitush, which is a mosquito. But if you get balgaiva, don't think so great of yourself, because the mosquito was created before you. Perish, meaning, the Gemara says, Chazal tell us that a mosquito is one of the very unique animals that's only machnes and not moitzi. Right, which basically means that you can't really exist that way. Everything that's existing has to be machnes and moitzi. A human being, for sure, machnes and moitzi. Most animals are machnes and moitzi, right? In and out, intake and exit, so to speak, right? A mosquito doesn't do that. It doesn't. Nothing comes out of it, which is why it doesn't last very long. It's not got really any real mitzias to it. It's the lowest of the lowest. It's the furthest and most lowest creature that exists. And that creature was koidemes the ish hachoita b'shtal shel avidus chayis motzon Elyon Baruch Hu. That mosquito, which is the lowest of the lowest, was created before that guy that did that terrible, what we call a Aveira Kala, and which is going against the Rabbeinu Shalom and Ratzon Hashem in that case. And we have to recognize that, and you have to realize that, and you have to think about that. V'kol shekain, even if the sinner we're saying is lower than a mosquito, right? So for kol shekain shal balei chayim atmeim, then he's for sure lower than balei chayim that are tamei. V'afilu chayis royus should call him einima meshanim tafkidom. They don't change their tafkid. U'b'gedosu yisbarach shalom memucham. V'afagav di'iu loy chazi. U'kamesh kosov u'merachem v'chitchem right? That means that, literally talking about human being, that the animals have a natural fear. It's an inborn natural fear for a human being. That's what it says. In other words, we sort of put our fear, our dread onto animals. That the Gemara says in Shabbos, right, there's all sorts of mahalchim of what happens if a person encounters a bear. What should he do, right, in order to try and stand up against him? If you can't run away fast enough, there's all mahalchim what to do, right? And for example, if you go into a safari, they have all different ways, right? We did this, and we were all nervous when we went to South Africa. Like, well, how do you know they're not going to attack us, right? Like they said, there's no bars and there's no cage on there. So Chazal tell us over here that really a Chaya Ra doesn't have a moishel, can't, so to speak, be superior on an Adam, unless it looks like a behemoth. If it looks like an Adam, then there's nothing to talk about. But tzaddikim she'ein tzelem Elokim mistalik ma'al pneim, tzaddikim that their tzelem Elokim remains on their faces, kol chayes rois iskapyon kamayu, all of the chayes rois already subdue completely to them. Right? We've heard stories of there's those stories of tzaddikim that came out. There was a lion or somewhere over there. The tzaddik comes up, and Yeshua famously with the lion came out. He was wearing his tefillin. So the tefillin was like him, stomach was both of them. And animals get meshiga when they see a tzelem elikim. They run away. Like, what's the pshat? And so Chazal are telling us that the tzelem elikim is never removed from their faces. So Mamela, every animal is sort of subdued when it comes to that. Right, and what we're saying is the person that does this tiny little, Avera Kala is worse than any of these, lower than any of these Bali Chaim. This guy that does an Avera, and he's over on the Ratzon of the Rabbeinu Shalom, even if it's a small Avera Kala, whatever that means, B'shas Maisa, at the time of doing the Avera, he is mamash separate. He's distancing himself from the Rabbeinu Shalom. So by doing an Avera, what's basically going on is there's no difference between you and an animal. And not only that, you're even worse than an animal. That's what the Tanya is telling us over here in this case. So that's really what we're coming to now over here. We're trying to figure out ki korev elecha, this idea that it can be korev to me. How can it be korev to me? So he's going to explain it more by Riches in Perek Chav Hei, but just to give you a little bit of a warm-up, what he's basically telling you, if you think for a minute, oh my gosh, I'm about to do this terrible Avera, and maybe in my eyes it's not so terrible, it's one of the lightweight ones, big deal. I'm lower than an animal. I'm separating myself from the Rebbeinu Shalom more than an animal that's Tommy. I can't do this. When you put that on your head, Chabad, right? You put that on your brain, you're spoiling on that a little bit, you're like, I can't do this. That's Kikor Velecha. That's what he's hinting to over here. It becomes closer to you because every person can do it. And he's told us in Perek Yud Ches how every person, every human being, every Yid is shayach to be able to be Kikor Velecha when you think about this. And he's going to go more in Tariq, as I told you in the next parak, but we'll finish off. Uma! And this, by the way, is a Modige Kasha. Right? This basically is a big Kasha. He's basically put everything in the same category. And the question is obvious. So how is it? Right? In other words, how can you basically say that all Averas are equal, and if you do an Avera, you separate yourself from the Rabbeinu Shalom? Hold on a minute. Are there not Averas that I'm allowed to Machal Shabbos? Are there not Averas that for Yarav Al Yav I have to kill myself and not do those Averas, the Gimel Kamarun that we all know are the three big ones? So then there are differences. So he says, no. There's a Gemara. Right? You can learn it in the Koilah, see basin, that the Torah said that you're allowed to Machal one Shabbos in order to keep more Shabbosim. It's not pshat, one is more heavy than the other, one is more chomer than the other, but there's a reason why you're allowed to Machal Shabbos for a Chodesh Yesh B'Sakana, because we wanted to go along and keep more Shabbosis. It's not because one is lighter and one is more stringent. Agav, he goes on. You should know. Shabbos is chomo and equal to avodah zarah in the shchitas mumah l'davar achab yehudeis in the base whatever masha'inki b'mumah l'gidei arayis v'afili av b'kor p'neresh dorich Shabbos l'gidei arayis ala t'gzerek kosefu. Right. Ella, we have to finish the perek by saying shala acha ma'isachei. That was all b'shas avera. What about afterwards? What happens after a person? The difference between b'shas avera and the consequence after it. If it's one of the averos does not carry within it, koris or misav deishamayim sheinav shelekis meisel gami, that the nefesh shelekis does not die, so to speak, completely. Rak, because if it does, then you got big problems. Rak shenivgam ksas dveikusa va'achizasa b'shosha b'chet zeh. You just made a pagam, you made some kind of blemish, with the dveikus, with the shorish of the chet that you just did. So Rabban Shavahari gam nafshay achayunis abahamis hamad besha beguva v'chem guva v'chayzum ba'olim asitra achar klipazu u'meskoven lekadusha nefesh adakesum lebesh behem ma'mina b'shem echad. Which basically means what he wants to say is what you're doing now, and he's going to explain it in Ma'amur Barichas, is you are schlepping the nefesh kiss that you have inside you to a place that it shouldn't really be and doesn't want to be. And that's a terrible thing to do. V'gam, b'shasachet, hoyso ba'omno ito yisborach. Even during the Aveira in that case, right, where be'etzem, you still believe in the Rabbeinu Shalom and everything's there. You've thrown it into golus. So the nefesh kiss that you have inside you, you're not killing it, it always remains there, avada, but you're putting it into golus for those few minutes that you're doing the Aveira. You're pushing it down and down and down into this golus, into this exile, because right now you're being Osik and Aveira, which is richuk of Ratzon Hashem. There's no greater golus than taking the neshama, the beautiful neshama that the Rabban Shem gave you, this chelik and a kam mal mamish, and throwing it all the way down to the lowest place impossible. It's a big, it's a bizayon. It's horrible. It's golus einach golus godol mizeh commotion is el. As we're going to have, as we heard previously, the shorishim nafshah kol basis yolhu machach milas from the highest place. So you're taking something that comes from the highest of the highest place, b'shas haver, and you're throwing it all the way down. V'hu yisparach machmas echad. We know that the Rabban Shem is all the one. So during the Aveira, that's what you're doing. You're schlepping this nefesh kiss, this beautiful, wonderful neshama, which is the chelik of the kabbalah mamish, and you're throwing it down to the lowest place. B'shas ma'isa. It's a horrible thing to do. And what's the mashal? V'hu ki b'shala oiches v'oishes hamelech. Says the Heilige Tanya, you take the king's head, umayrido lemata, and you push it down. V'toimin ponov b'soy beis hakisim moled soya, and you sort of stick the king's head into. Excuse, I'm saying it, but I'm only translating the words of the Balatanya, into the toilet that's very dirty. That's what you're doing. The most disgusting thing you could do in the world, even to a regular human being, even if you only do it for 10 minutes. This is the comparison. When you do an Aveira, you're taking the chelik and the kamama mamish, and you're submerging it into a place that's disgusting, that's dirty, that's horrible. And therefore, it's just like the case of taking the king's head and putting him over there. Now, what we need to discuss is more mafurish. What we're going to do in the next parak tomorrow is getting back to the Kikor Ve'lechem. It's Hashem. We'll discuss tomorrow. Have a wonderful day.